The U.S. now says an airstrike that killed a top Iranian general was to prevent a, quote, imminent attack. That word comes amid angry street protests in Tehran and vows of revenge from Iran's leaders. Donald Trump ordered the attack that killed Qassem Soleimani. He is the commander of Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guards and, according to Middle East experts, the military mastermind who directed pro-Iranian militias like Hezbollah and other groups across the region and beyond. These are images showing the aftermath of last night's airstrike today. It targeted 2 vehicles. The drone strike also killed a leader of a pro-Iranian militia in Iraq. He's a militant reportedly linked to attacks on Americans that go back decades. And this is the scene in Iran's capital. Thousands of people gathering outside Tehran's Grand Mosque to protest Soleimani's death. They shouted revenge and death to America. Some demonstrators burned U.S., British, and Israeli flags. Ayatollah Khamenei has declared 3 days of public mourning. Khamenei also warning, quote, harsh retaliation is waiting for the United States. We have this story covered from the Middle East to Washington for you today. Freelance journalist Rebecca Collard is in Beirut, and the CBC's Jacqueline Hansen is in the U.S. Capitol. To start, Rebecca, we begin with you in Lebanon. Why did this airstrike happen now? Let's explore the timing of this.
Right, Jennifer. So we heard both from the U.S. President Donald Trump and also from U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that part of the reason this happened now is because they are saying that there was an imminent threat to U.S. Nationals in the region, and that was coming from an attack planned by Qasem Soleimani. So we heard that. But also, let's remember, this is coming after a strong escalation this week in tensions between the U.S. and Iran. So a week ago, we had this attack on this base near the Iraqi city of Kirkuk. That killed 1 U.S. national, injured several others. The U.S. responded to that by targeting Kataib Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-backed militia, hitting 5 sites in Iraq and Syria and killing around 24 of their fighters. Now, the response to that were these protests this week, Jennifer, outside the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, basically putting the U.S. Embassy under siege by protesters who support Iran. And we saw the U.S. personnel there going into a safe room. So that was a real escalation. And then today we woke up to this news that the U.S. had targeted Qasem Soleimani. But, as we've heard, this wasn't just a reason. This wasn't because of this one-off, because of this week's tensions. Qasem Soleimani was head of Quds Force for decades. He was really responsible, Jennifer, for Iran's expansionism in the region. So because of that, this was really part of a larger U.S. policy to counter Iranian influence in the region. And we've heard comments from U.S. officials today to that regard as well. But I think this is definitely, the timing of this is interesting because of this escalation this week, Jennifer.
And Rebecca, you are in Beirut, a base for Hezbollah, one of the pro-Iranian militant groups linked to Soleimani. We have Iran vowing retaliation. So what are some of the possible repercussions?
Yeah, Jennifer, not just Iran vowing retaliation. Hezbollah here in Lebanon vowing retaliation. Iraqi militias that are backed by Iran vowing retaliation. As I just said, he was very much part of or responsible for Iran's expansionism in the region. And that means that he was very much responsible for bolstering Hezbollah here in Lebanon, training, weapons, funding. He was also somewhat of a diplomat for Iranian foreign policy. He was the guy who was, all over the region, meeting with leaders of allied countries, meeting with allied militias, and building those relationships. And so in Iraq as well, he was, so responsible for the operations of Iraqi Shia militias that are allied with Iran. And so because of that, we've also seen vows that of retaliation from those militant groups as well, from Hezbollah here, from Iraqi militias in Iraq. So it's difficult to say right now, Jennifer, what exactly the response will be. It's difficult to see that, that Iran would respond directly militarily on a U.S. military target. More likely what we're going to see in the coming days is some sort of retaliation from one of these militia groups that's allied with Iran. And this has really been Iran's policy for years, if not decades, that rather than direct military strikes against U.S. targets, we're likely to see one of these militia groups, either here in Lebanon or in Iraq, target either the U.S. directly or one of its allies. And, today, Israel said that it is putting its military on high alert, worrying that, in fact, Iran will retaliate against Israel rather than a U.S. target. But either way, we're definitely going to see a response. And Jennifer, no matter what response that is, whether it's massive or it's relatively small, that is going to raise tensions even further. And a lot of people are worried that that will actually result in a much wider regional conflict, Jennifer.
Rebecca, thank you for the latest from there. Rebecca Collard is in Beirut. This story is certainly attracting plenty of international reaction. Laura McQuillan joins me now with more on that. So what are you seeing, Laura?
Well, a lot of concern, a lot of condemnation of this, Jennifer, from around the world, including US allies who are not thrilled by this assassination last night. The United Nations is one organisation that's been speaking out today. We have a statement from a spokesperson for the UN Secretary General saying the Secretary General has consistently advocated for de-escalation in the Gulf. He is deeply concerned with the recent escalation. This is a moment in which leaders must exercise maximum restraint. The world cannot afford another war in the Gulf. And, we've seen such strong reaction from Iran throughout the day, threatening revenge, saying that there will be harsh vengeance awaiting the criminals behind this assassination of Soleimani. But I want to show you a statement from the foreign minister there as well, released earlier today, saying the malice and stupidity of American terrorist forces who assassinated General Soleimani, a hero, martyr and commander of the fight against terrorism and extremism, will undoubtedly further strengthen the tree of resistance in the region and the world. Something we've also seen from Iran's allies today, warning there will be repercussions over this. And one other reaction I want to show you comes from Iraq. That country, of course, where this took place, not mourning Soleimani because of its relationship with Iran, but of course mourning a militia commander who was killed alongside him, saying the assassination of an Iraqi military commander who holds an official position is considered an aggression on Iraq and a dangerous escalation that will light the fuse of a destructive war in Iraq, the region and the world. So Iraq appearing to sound a warning to the US over this as well, urging de-escalation. And just seeing now, Jennifer, the Iraqi parliament is going to hold a special session to discuss what has happened here.
And Laura, we're also starting now to hear from U.S. officials speaking about plans against any possible retaliation in the wake of Soleimani's death. Tell us more about what we're seeing.
Some really strong language out of New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio just in the past half hour or so, saying our world changed last night. That's how he opened a press conference with a warning to New Yorkers about a new threat from Iran. He's saying this is a new reality. While the city has, of course, seen threats in the past, 9/11, for instance, it's never seen something from a state actor, a government that is backing a military that also has an international network at its disposal. So he's saying that New York is going to be putting more police out on the streets, putting them at key landmarks because they are fearful of some kind of an attack. Here's what he said in his own words.
We're in, at this point, a de facto state of war between the United States of America and Iran. None of us knows how this will play out. It will likely take weeks and months, maybe even years before we see where all this goes. But we have never confronted in recent decades the reality of a war with a government of a large country with an international terror network at its behest.
So you heard there that incredible language, de facto state of war, Jennifer. He's saying that an attack he doesn't believe is likely in the immediate term, more like months or years ahead, and urging people to stay vigilant. We also heard from the NYPD commissioner saying that there are no credible threats at this point in time, but that counterterrorism and intelligence branches of the NYPD are keeping a close eye on Iran and its allies, urging people in New York City, go about your lives, but stay vigilant.
Thanks for this, Laura. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, meanwhile, has been making the rounds on the American television networks explaining the decision to launch the attack. He says Soleimani was involved in plotting an imminent attack on Americans and others.
The American people should know that President Trump's decision to remove Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield saved American lives. There's no doubt about that. He was actively plotting in the region to take actions, a big action as he described it, that would have put dozens, if not hundreds, of American lives at risk. We know it was imminent. This was an intelligence-based assessment that drove our decision-making process.
So let's go now to Washington, where the U.S. administration is working to further explain the attack. CBC's Jacqueline Hansen is tracking it for us. Jacqueline, what is President Trump saying today?
Well, he is, of course, reacting to this as well, and on Twitter, as to be expected. He has been tweeting in the last couple of hours, and let's just bring that up for you right away. So President Trump saying that the general has been killed or badly wounded, or that general has killed or badly wounded thousands of Americans over an extended period of time and was plotting to kill many more, but got caught. He was directly and indirectly responsible for the deaths of millions of people, including the recent large number of protesters killed in Iran itself. While Iran will never be able to properly admit it, he says Soleimani was both hated and feared within the country. They are not nearly as saddened as the leaders will let the outside world believe. He should have been taken out years ago. So there he's talking about how he made this move, but that other presidents before him didn't, likely referencing specifically George W. Bush and Barack Obama, who it's been reported that they had similar opportunities to take out Soleimani, but chose not to, supposedly concerned or fearing the consequences that could come from doing so. But we did also see from former National Security Advisor John Bolton on Twitter as well. He said that this was long in the making, and he congratulated everyone involved. So the U.S. administration also saying, as the clip from the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, that this was an imminent threat against the lives of Americans, and he did explain specifically that this was the lives of Americans within that region, within the Middle East, not here in America, but there, that they were particularly concerned about, and that is why they took this huge step in making this strike. But there still is much concern about whether it was a wise choice, Jennifer.
And Jacqueline, what are other lawmakers saying now? Some of it seems to be falling along party lines.
Well, absolutely. This is a very divided place normally these days, but this is also ratcheting up that division. Republicans applauding this, praising the president, saying that, the president showed that he won't take these actions or these threats from Iran, and saying that that's a very important position that the president is taking. But Democrats, not so much. They are concerned more about the potential fallout for this. And we do have a statement from the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and she said that these airstrikes risk provoking further dangerous escalation of violence. America and the world cannot afford to have tensions escalate to the point of no return. She also just tweeted as well, and she went on to sort of explain that she says that the Trump administration conducted these strikes without an authorization for the use of military force against Iran, and further that this action was taken without the consultation of Congress. So she's saying she didn't know that this strike was going to happen in advance. But we also heard from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, and he said that he did know about President Trump going to be taking this action or authorizing this strike. At least he knew of the potential of it to happen in advance. So really some questions about who was in the loop and when they were, but also seeing some signs that this may play into the upcoming campaigns for this year's election. This is a big year here in the United States, and we saw Joe Biden, Democratic presidential candidate. He seems to have already taken the opportunity to use this towards his campaigning. He shared a video on Twitter saying that this is a moment for him to show that he can lead, saying that every day that Donald Trump directs American national security is a dangerous day for the United States and the world. So Jennifer, I will be continuing to watch all of the reaction here in Washington, and I'll bring it back to you.
Thanks for the latest there. CBC's Jacqueline Hansen in Washington.